Alright, go.
Alright, we are here. It is May 15th, 2022 at the Fairfield County Infirmary in Lancaster, Ohio. It's Casey and I here tonight along with J.J. Johnson and Scott McCoy of West Virginia Paranormal. And then we will have Zach and another fellow who I haven't learned his name yet here very shortly to kind of help out as the night progresses. We are at a location in central eastern Ohio that dates back to earliest America, back in the earliest days of the Ohio country. Some of the reporting, one of the things that I did today is I went to the library on the way here to kind of do some snooping, some perusing through the different documentation. And the earliest documentation I can find of this land here, other than what we know is with the Native Americans and stuff like that that lived in this area, was through a lady by the name of Miss Elizabeth Sherrick, who was the granddaughter of one of the first settlers in the Fetters Run area, which is where we are right now. The Fetters Run is the creek right alongside of the school here, who settled in this area in 1801. Elizabeth was born in 1798. They lived on the farm just north of the infirmary, so just a little bit that way. And she even recalled as a young kid having some experiences with the Native Americans here in times of lean harvest and such like that, would often come to their farm for food. And the mother would set a table and they would sit down and eat with them. This was a very isolated community, only a few scattered farmhouses and stuff like that in this area during this late 1700s, early 1800s period. The first death that she remembered on this property that we are sitting on right now was a lady by the name of Katie Ditto. There wasn't really 100% certainty on how old this lady was. They estimated she was in her 40s or 50s, but the reason why is Miss Elizabeth was only like 8 years old when this actual event happened. The Ditto's family actually lived where the infirmary is now. The Fetters family is also right here along this creek, which is who the creek was actually named after, was on a farm road just a little ways away up that way. And they recorded a grandfather's death as well. Now in the 1820s, in 1826, and in the era about 10 years beforehand, the county here in Fairfield wanted the local townships to take care of folks that had special needs, folks that had handicaps of any type, or elderly folks, widows, orphans, etc. That was the individual township's responsibility, and they would contract that out. Well, apparently the contracting system didn't work too well, probably some people taking advantage of getting paid and not necessarily providing the services accordingly. So in 1827 there was a recorded need for a county infirmary. So they acquired 170 acres out here where we are right now and built an original wood-framed structure that would be later replaced in 1840 by the brick structure that we see while we are here. Some of the directors that we were able to come across was William Fetters, George Darfus, a man by the name of William Fosnow, superintendents were Kaiser. And we went through just in general and kind of looked at some of the specifics of the location. The reports in this place vary. Over 170 odd years, when we were going through the documentation today, somewhere in the neighborhood of 1,200 people are reportedly buried on this property that even passed away here. This property was a functioning, basically a nursing home for a large portion of its career. People 70, 80, 90s that didn't have any family would be brought here, and here they would pass away and they would be buried on the ground because a lot of times they didn't have any family to take care of. And that's why on this hill that we are on right now, they did ground penetrating radar and found that there were over 1,000 corpses buried standing up, which is odd for a number of reasons. But one of the reports also as well with this location is because of all of this, there was some poisoning in the water because of all the formaldehyde and such like that was used. So there's a lot of things that went on with the overall location. Now when we were doing some of our background research on the location, One name that kept coming up was a man by the name of Hummel, who was a superintendent back in the early 1900s. Several clippings include from the Cincinnati Enquirer, where several local folks who had influential ears from people within the building had reported poor treatment for the inmates that were secured here. Now keep in mind that most of the people that were here for, they were orphans, they were widows, they were old, they were disabled, they just couldn't take care of themselves. But even still, they were referred to as inmates. In 1902, there was an inquiry that came across from the Cincinnati Enquirer where there were folks looking into some of the poor treatment that was reportedly happened in this location. This Henry Hummel that numerous people that have done prior investigations in this location and several of the tour guides have mentioned was someone that was reportedly very active in terms of poor treatment in his building. And one of the stories that we were able to, or one of the stories that is told here frequently, is that an inmate actually attacked Mr. Hummel with a 3-foot iron bar. Well, this report in 1918 that came from the Lancaster Eagle confirms or corroborates that story. So Henry Hummel was actually beaten a couple times with this large iron bar right out in front of the building, and was lucky to get away with his life from everything that is told. So numerous reports are of horrible treatment. Crazed inmate attacks Superintendent Hummel at County Infirmary. Order of removal discharging Superintendent Henry Hummel. He was a very unpopular person in this area, which is interesting because when I was looking at the record book over at the library today, in their specific records, they do not even have him listed as a superintendent. Take that for what you will. So there was numerous reports of a Mr. Hummel. Another story that we have is of a Miss Jane Householder who on, it looks to be Thursday, March 21st of 1929, she was a 73-year-old woman, if memory serves, that was up in one of the rooms and had an issue where she went to open a fireplace, and the stories are kind of lost, but one of the stories is that there was somehow an accelerant put on the fire. That accelerant kicked back onto her, burned her dress off, basically burned her third-degree burns all around. She ended up dying in the building 9 hours later. This article, the front page newspaper, corroborates that story. And then from the Lancaster Eagle Gazette, 30 years ago, Miss Jane Householder, a 73-year-old inmate of the Fairfield County home since March 11th, 1891, died of burns when her clothing caught fire from a gas stove. She had no known relatives. One of the common stories here is that a lot of these folks didn't have any known relatives. They didn't have anybody kind of working with them. They didn't have anybody to look at. And that's how a lot of them wound up here in unmarked graves along this hillside. There's a lot of stories of violence in this location. Beyond the story of Henry Hummel, there was a Dolph Griggs who was a 72-year-old who either had somebody inflict an injury on him or he inflicted it on himself that ended up with basically a 2.5-inch cut on his throat. No one has, as of yet, determined the cause of this injury. We probably will never know. There was an itinerant journalist by the name of Lambert T. Johnson who died here in this location, who was prominent in the Harding campaign for president. There was a Fremont Mason, an 76-year-old man rather, who had spent most of his life in this location, who passed away in the location. A mother of 8, actually from Apple Grove, West Virginia, which is about 10 minutes away from my house, who passed away here in the location, a lady by the name of Miss Eloisa Steele. There was a Tommy Whittle who died at the infirmary, and his secret will be buried with him. This is kind of interesting because it says, this Fairfield County Infirmary mystery man died at the infirmary, and his secret will be buried with him. Since he was found helpless nearly 8 years ago beside the railroad tracks at Lockville, his identity has never been disclosed, and he goes to the Potter's Field, which is where we are right now in the graveyard, leaving an unsolved enigma on the county's records. It's interesting, I don't know if the Tommy Whittle moniker is a name that is just given to him and they don't actually know his name. I'm not entirely certain. There was a Homer Evener, a 57-year-old man who was rushed to the hospital here in Lancaster and died shortly after midnight due to head and internal injuries, though it does not announce how those happened. Now, this was a working farm at one point. Injuries do happen, but there possibly was something else, and we may never know for sure.
Buildings outside, carpentry shop, blacksmith shop, meat house, chicken coop, big red barn, of course. And then the house next door is the superintendent's house, like I said, was built in the 1920s.
Okay.
All of those are off limits right now. We're just letting people in the main building. But you guys are welcome to go outside, take pictures of them.
Gotcha.
You guys are welcome to go to the cemetery that's also out back, which we're not in a good spot for me to show you, so we'll go down this way a little bit.
All right.
This might be a little bit. No, there's a big building in the way. Now we're back on the women's side again.
Okay.
That had died
Yeah.
inside of the building. Because it actually does state place of death, infirmary.
Yeah, it does, and it tells you where the burial is and everything. I just spent a couple hours over there looking at it.
So this is the men's side of the third floor. And each side would have had their own jail cell. So the jail cell that you saw over there was for the women. This door right here is the same similar door structure as the women's door. So that's why we believe this is where the men's jail cell was. If you also look along right through here, you can see parts of where the door would have been attached.
Yeah.
And you can actually feel it. So that's why we believe this is it. Sadly, it is off limits right now due to structural damage. We are hoping to have it open next summer, but that's a little ways away.
Gotcha.
We gotta fix the roof first, which that is on our bucket list. Let's see, I'm trying to think. One of the guys that lived here, his name was C.H. Jennery, but everybody knew him as Nuisance, and that's the only thing they called him by was a nuisance. When he lived here, he required to have 5 pounds of beef at every one of his meals.
I saw that in the records today. I cracked up when I read that.
There is no way you're getting 5 pounds of beef. You're probably not even getting an ounce of food on your plate, to be completely honest. So he would growl at the staff if he didn't get 5 pounds of beef. We have heard that through here before. I actually heard it downstairs on the second floor on the side. Caught it on my recorder too, and we caught it on 2 other recorders as well. So it was pretty funny when it happened.
I liked when I read the records, it said he wanted 5 pounds of beef, and he didn't get it, he would growl, and then the words were, that could not be supplied or something like that, so he was moved or transferred somewhere else. I was like, well, you didn't get what you wanted there, cowboy.
We've also had a man who was found with a 2 to 2.5 inch slit in his throat. His name was Dolph Griggs. We don't know if somebody else did it or if he did it to himself. They still haven't been able to figure that out to this day. We'll talk about Seward upstairs because it's more relevant up there. But we don't know how many people were actually housed inside of the rooms that were resident rooms. There's 62 rooms in this entire building. And only, I'd say, half of those, not even probably half of those, are resident rooms. So, and at one point in time, the highest peak was 83 people that were living here. But you also had people chained upstairs, so they could have given their rooms out while they were chained upstairs. You had people who were homeless and transient that also lived upstairs, which I'll show you guys where that area is at. So yeah, we'll go ahead and we'll head on upstairs. Director's office that I was telling you guys about. Right now we have it set up as a little boys' room because we know there were kids here at one point in time, not just from the orphanage, but also kids who were brought in with their single parents and were separated from their single parents. So since we know that men and women weren't allowed to talk with each other, we're not entirely sure if the little boys and little girls were too. So we set up little separate areas for them. This is like a little boys' playroom. And then downstairs is set up as a little girls' playroom, or the doll room, as everybody calls it. But this was the health administrator's office. That fireplace mantle is where she had stuff that would move. It's hard to gauge now with so many people that come in here with things moving.
Yeah.
But all that stuff has been like that since I left out of this area during my daytime tour, so nothing has moved.
Gotcha.
So if you guys come back and you notice anything,
Okay, I got you.
hopefully it's something good for you guys.
Sounds good.
But these would have originally, during the core farm, been used as day rooms.
Okay.
These would have been the areas that
Social rooms and such.
the staff would have had one little social room, so that way they could have time to get away
Yeah.
from what was going on the floors, and then the residents would have had these two.
Okay.
You guys are welcome to walk through the day rooms right here. We'll go downstairs and I'll show you guys the doll room downstairs. So this is that long hallway that I was telling you guys about when we were downstairs. I was up here, had my back to the hallway. I was actually standing right over there and had something run up on me. You could hear the footsteps clear as day. It was a very intense feeling at the time, since I knew I was the only one in the building. This is also where we were up here back in February. And a couple of us that are on staff were up here because we had heard footsteps during flashlight tours. So we came up here when we had a break in it and we were listening. And we started hearing more footsteps come out of the long hallway here. And this is where Amanda saw those legs that I was telling you guys about. But history-wise, this long hallway would have been used as the area where the people who were transient or homeless that were passing through town could stay. But to be able to stay here, they had to work for their stay, whether it be helping take care of the building, helping take care of the people in the building, or helping with the farm that was outside. They had it partitioned into 5 different partitions, and they had up to 5 beds in each partition. So, like I said, this floor has been extremely active the last couple of weeks. It was really active during our public ghost hunt that we had a couple of weeks ago, and it was very active during flashlight tours as well.
Okay.
Sectioned off area. Now, Gorsuch Realty tried to take this property. They were going to pretty much tear everything down, and they were going to build apartments. There was also talk that they were just going to use this building as studios for the college students that are across the street. But they took ground penetrating radar, not just in the area that's marked off, but also the unmarked off areas back here, and in between the house and the building. and they actually found bodies throughout. They were actually pinging off the people's heads because they're all standing straight up buried.
Oh, yeah.
So we believe there's more than 1,200 people buried on the property, but we know it's estimated 1,200 just in that marked off section. So,
Okay.
but yeah, that's the building.
There was a famous case involving this building here with one of the morticians that worked in this location. A doctor who was involved in a body snatching case who crammed a corpse into a coffee box and tried to smuggle it out of here, and it ended up being discovered when the thing started to smell. This was from the Lancaster Gazette. It came Lancaster's famous body snatching case in the 1880s caused furor at Infirmary. People were wondering how this could happen. Well, it ended up being something that was allowed to happen anyway, because Ohio state law said that anybody that passed away in one of these type of locations could be taken out and used for dissection purposes. So the guy was let off scot-free. I can just imagine the possibilities today, but at that time, that's what it was. So we've had a lot of different stories and stuff like that, and we've dug through quite a few different records in this location. I was going through some of the death reports in this place, and it's interesting in their record books that they document folks coming into the infirmary in various different ways, whether it be through deaf, blind, infirm, epilepsy, elderly, and then they go even a step further and they label it idiotic, manic, lunatic, cripple, and then for all intents and purposes, when we're talking about the Jim Crow era, one of the things they also document is colored. There were several children born in this infirmary, and many of them spent most of their lives here. There are various ages represented, from the age of 1 day that I recorded all the way up to 97 years old. So there was a wide variety of folks that were here. This building operated as the county orphanage until the late 1880s, when the new building was built in the facility that was just for the orphanage. There was a returned orphan by the name of Geo Hunter, who was adopted at 5 years old. He was born here, was adopted at 5 years old, was returned to the facility 2 years later, and they had records of him as late as 1878 still being in this location. There was also a John Mitchell, who was listed as too old to work. He was a 93-year-old man who was here and passed away somewhere in the neighborhood of 1854 to 1855. All kinds of disabilities of all circumstance being documented in these, from physical to mental disabilities. It ran the gambit. There was a man by the name of C.H. Jennery in 1886 who was well known as a nuisance in this location, who would often growl for 5 pounds of beef at any given time for his meals. Well, at this time, that was not going to happen. It still wouldn't happen today. And this gentleman did not spend a whole lot of time here in this location. He was moved short afterwards. But one of the reports in this location is that you will hear growling. And it kind of fits with the time frame and the story that we have heard. So with that, what we are going to be doing here tonight is we're going to be doing just an overall investigation of the location with West Virginia Paranormal. We're going to kind of be moving around a lot. We are a little bit undermanned for SRI standards, but that's okay because we're going to kind of coordinate with West Virginia Paranormal and Zach and his fellow here just shortly. But we look forward to sharing anything that we have with you, and we hope that this was an informative kind of overall view of this location to go forward. Thank you.